Hope you're having a great week. Hope you got some wonderful plans for the weekend. That includes cannabis. So my story today comes from none other than the New York Times, and it's from their morning newsletter. And it's entitled, America's Embrace of Marijuana, Why Public Opinion Has Changed So Quickly. This story came out yesterday. It was written by a fellow named Germain Lopez. So 12 years ago, mainstream politicians opposed marijuana legalization. Recreational use was forbidden, even in most liberal states. Today, even conservative states are considering the policy, including North Dakota, South Dakota. I always thought they were one state. Florida, and through ballot initiatives this November. And both presidential contenders now favor legalization. Kamala Harris confirmed her support this month. Donald Trump said he will vote for Florida's initiative, which I guess is around legalization. He also backs easing of federal restrictions on weed. This is the first time even one major party candidate has publicly supported legalizing pot. The shift was unusually quick for Americans' politics. It's very rare for bipartisan consensus to flip in less than a generation. One reason politicians have changed their minds so quickly is that there are a following shift in voters' views today. In today's newsletter, I'll look at the public opinion and how it's evolved and why Harris's and Trump's positions could matter even in states that have already legalized marijuana. Americans' views on domestic policy are largely stable. Consider guns, for example. Congress passed the majority of major federal gun measures, the Brady Act, 3 years ago. Since then, views on whether firearms should be made more or less strict have barely moved, according to Gallup. This is typical for most domestic policy issues, researchers have found. Marijuana legalization appears to be an exception to this. In 2000, 31% supported legalization, and now it's as high as 70% of adults in the U.S. favor marijuana legalization. The new consensus formed long before politicians caught up. Most Democrats have supported legalization since the late 2000s, and most Republicans have since 2017, according to Gallup. Why did public opinion change so quickly? One explanation is exhaustion with the war on drugs. Decades of punitive policy did not get great results. The United States is in the middle of the deadliest drug overdose crisis ever. Although overdose deaths are now falling, people want reform. And one place to start is with the drug that most Americans see as less dangerous than legal substances like alcohol and tobacco. The shift has continued even as legalization has produced its own problems. In states where marijuana is legal, people have reported more addiction and other serious medical issues that are linked to daily marijuana use. Still, public opinion remains in favor of legal pot, and now Democrats and Republican leaders are catching up. With many states legalizing marijuana, perhaps as a majority, after this year's election, you may wonder whether it matters that the presidential candidates have come around to legalization. After all, many states have addressed the issue before federal officials caught up. But federal law still shapes marijuana policy at the state level. For example, many banks, which are regulated at the federal level, remain wary of holding money from marijuana businesses. In many ways, the law treats those transactions the same way a bank looks at transactions from a drug cartel or other criminal enterprises. This leaves dispensaries open to robbery because many can't take credit cards and can't find a secure place to store all of their cash. Federal regulation can also help address some of the problems that have appeared with legalization. Congress will ultimately decide whether federal marijuana laws are loosened or repealed. But the next House and Senate will be able to make such changes with confidence, knowing that they probably won't face a veto from the White House. A related story, they had a link to a legal jar of weed can cost you $60 in New York. I don't know. A legal jar of weed. How big is the jar, right? Doesn't it depend on how big the jar is? So, yeah, I thought this was an interesting article only from the point of view that it's in Jason's favorite rag, New York Times. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think, you know, having this discussion, at least I think in the last presidential election cycle, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, there was almost... yes, he will.
He may correct you if you're right.
Well, he'll correct you if you're right, Dr. Mark.
Right. But there was really no discussion around cannabis in the 2020 election or in the 2016 election. I remember feeling like, man, they totally ignored this issue, which again is central to all of us here on the panel here, and certainly to most of our viewership. But it just seemed so disappointing up until this presidential election that cannabis policy or cannabis regulation or legalization wasn't really addressed at all. And to show you how out of touch Biden was, you know, if you looked at his cannabis policies in the 2020 election, he favored medical and favored states' rights and all that, but he also favored moving it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And anybody who knows anything about the whole rescheduling to Schedule 3 knows that is completely inconsistent. You can't be for medical and for states' rights, but then basically say, oh, we're going to move it to Schedule 3, which is going to completely wipe out the industry as we know it today with, you know, state-regulated grows and state-regulated dispensaries and distros. But I think the take-home from this message is it is part of the discussion of the presidential election. So I think that's good. I think we've moved the needle a little bit to hear these candidates at least talking about it. So again, that's my opinion from the great state of Vermont here at St. Michael's College. I'd be interested in what my fellow correspondents have to say about, you know, the New York Times bringing this to light as a presidential campaign issue.
Dr. Mark, Joe Biden did bring it up when he was talking about decriminalizing and pandering to the black voters.
Well, I think what happened, Rico, is Joe Biden took a very soft stance, and his soft stance, which I found to be very inconsistent with each other, convinced me, who was working in Delaware at the time, to actually write a letter to Joe Biden. In fact, we got it to one of Joe Biden's staffers because of a friend knew someone who was working on the Biden campaign, and I had to say, hey, man, give him this one-pager because what he's saying about cannabis is completely incoherent and completely just total bullshit. Well, check it out. When Bernie dropped out of the race, he incorporated Bernie's part of the legalized cannabis platform. So I think that's what you might be talking about, Rico, because he did end up getting on board with it, but ultimately you could tell from his original position that he was very uninformed. And I put that not on Biden himself. He's just an old guy. I put that on the staffers who was feeding him information. So when I found that I can basically, through a friend of a friend, get information to a staffer, I dropped everything I was doing that day and wrote a one-pager and said, you need to give this to Biden because what he's saying is inconsistent with the law.
Yeah, I know hindsight is always 2020. But yeah, the Democrats got themselves. Yeah, the Democrats got themselves in this mess. Like, right, we wouldn't be where we are today if they didn't put Hillary Clinton in as a shoe-in in the first place.
Let me put it on the record that Bernie Sanders and I shop at the same grocery store. Okay.
That's
give Bernie.
Every once in a while, I see Bernie at the Hannafords, here in the New North End in Burlington, and I had to tell you, my biggest curiosity was not, going up and high-fiving or getting a selfie. My biggest curiosity was I wanted to look inside Bernie's shopping cart to see what Bernie eats. The only thing I remember seeing in there, I remember a couple Rice-A-Roni boxes, but I also remember
the San Francisco treat.
A box of the Kasha cereal. So, and that kind of took my attention away from seeing everything else that was in there. I was like, wow, Bernie eats Kasha. Maybe I should go get a box of Kasha.
Oh, man.
There's too many ways to take that one.
Yes. No, but Dr. Mark, Trump did bring this up in 2016. He came out and spoke in favor of medical use in states that have it.
Yeah, Jason, I guess the disappointing thing from Trump and mostly Trump staffers is they should have dug into Biden's inconsistent policies and then use this as a party platform in their plank, or use this as a plank in their party platform back in 2020. If Trump would have realized that and would have said, hey, if I get elected, we're going to just end prohibition and we're going to legalize cannabis. But you know what? He fell short of that. And that could have been.
I would argue it's not polarizing enough, and this is no knock on. I promise, it's no knock on Trump and the Trump supporters or anything, but they just seem to go after a lot of the issues that polarize people, and if it's not polarizing enough, guys don't really tackle them. Is that correct?
Well, there's a whole number of things, but he has shown a lot of evolution over the years on this issue to where now he's voting for legalization in Florida. This just because I see what you guys are trying.
No, I'm just asking, why is it called evolution and not flip-flopping if it comes from Donald Trump? It's flip-flopping from everybody else. Real question.
Because a lot of the times, because those people are paid off. Trump is not paid off. Trump has his own money in
Does he really?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, most of those people are paid off.
I'd like to spend an afternoon in Jason's brain just to see how it works.
He doesn't seem to be paid off. How would you know if he's paid off or not if he doesn't produce any tax returns?
Because he's the only person that's self-funding his campaign. What are you talking about?
Self-funding what?
He's not self-funding his campaign.
He's using
that's
the
a
campaign
lie.
money to pay for his
He's been self-funding his campaign, bro. He's his biggest contributor. No, he's not.
Oh my God,
that's a lie.
Yep. I'm just saying, I agree with you, Dr. Mark. I'm highly disappointed, and I have no a personal love for either party, but I do believe. Hold on, I do believe that the Republicans would win over a lot more. Folks like myself, disgusted with both sides of the political spectrum. Yeah. If they just went forward with the stuff that really matters, right? Instead of just attacking stuff that polarizes people, that it really has no real effect. We talk about the transgender issue, that's less than 1% of the population, right?
Less.
Right. You
I think if there was somebody on the Trump really staff like Jason Beck, so if Jason, if you were on Trump's staff and you could bring this to him and say, hey, we could win the election if you come on hard and say we're going to legalize cannabis, I mean, again, there are one-issue voters in this country.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't think there's enough single-issue voters, though.
Because Stephen Miller still has a place in Donald Trump's heart.
Hold on, are you going to let me finish what I'm saying? Thank you very much.
Not he pulled a Jenny Beck. It hits harder when I do it.
Jeez, you guys.
I think the thing that we should all stop for a moment.
Gently put a finger over Rico's lip.
I think there's something really important we should stop and examine, which is this.
It's amazing I'm still not getting to say what I'm trying to say to you guys. It's
Go ahead, amazing. Jason. I'll round up after you. Go ahead.
So, in regards with Trump has a record of being a president. We've had raids under Bush. We've had raids under Clinton. We've had raids under pretty much every single president except for Trump. And in all fairness, there haven't been raids under Biden.
There were no
weed raids under
at all.
Trump in Southern California.
There were no weed raids in regards with dispensaries and operating businesses, bro. That's
Bullshit.
not real.
There were cultivation raids.
I was covering them on the ground with my company.
Totally different. There's cultivation.
I had 5 agencies.
There were illegal
5
operators being
agencies,
raided in my
including
talking
Homeland
about-
Security, show up at my house, guns drawn, during the Trump administration, Jason.
For what? For what, Dr. Mark? For what was it for?
They wanted to hold. They had guns
Plead the
drawn.
fifth, Dr. Mark. Plead the fifth, just like Donnie would.
I am gonna plead the fifth, but what I can tell you is that it is scary
It had
when
nothing to do
Homeland
with legal
Security
market.
busts your door down and points guns at you and your wife.
I 100% agree with that part, but this is not for any legal market business that this is happening for.
Okay, let's get past non-facts. I just wanted to share something real quick before the show ends.
The show's not ending. I still have a story. I'm just dissenting.
Oh, hell yeah,
Just to
Jenny.
fucking take part
Let's
in
keep
this
it going.
anymore.
Yeah, we are overtime. We are overtime, and we do not want to take away from our final correspondent here. Do we have any other commercials? Or we just gonna roll with it?
Yep.